Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening. Today we're going to talk about how to raise an angel round or raise money from an angel investor. We'll talk about a little bit about the logistics that go behind what actually an angel investor is, and maybe some of the best practices to understand what those type of investors are looking for. Now, maybe you specifically aren't looking to raise money, but you work with companies who are. This is a great workshop to understand what those individuals are looking for. What this talk will not be is what some of the legal jargon and really specific legal things that people are looking for in raising money. Those can be found in different talks, but I think it's really important to focus just on what are some of the due diligence pieces to raise money. So an angel round or an angel investment is typically a $10,000 to $100,000 check from an accredited investor. An accredited investor is someone with a net worth of $1 million minus their home, or not including their home, or $200,000 a year single, or $300,000 combined with a spouse. So that is the way that the FCC defines an accredited investor. Typically, this investment is after a founder infuses capital into starting his business and raises some sort of capital from friends and family or uses other traditional banking to get off the ground. Typically, when you get to an angel round, you have done significantly more than just start your business. Other additional options, instead of raising from an angel investor, could be crowdfunding, working with a bank, credit cards, pre-sales, GoFundMe. People do it. Friends, families, and fools. And this talk is not about that. Now, while you can use some of the strategies to greater your chances at some of those others, this talk is not about how to make that better. So how do I know what I'm talking about? So personally, I've raised $196,000, and that was about 21 investors. I have invested in 13 companies and have also helped businesses secure hundreds of thousands of dollars in finances as well. So I have been in those shoes. While the hatch that you see today is a bootstrap business, I have lived in the world of angel investors, and I actually found it to be not that difficult. A lot of people feel that it's a very, very difficult situation to go through, but personally, there's definitely work associated with it. But I think if you kind of have a checklist of the things that are necessary and actually have a path and have a little bit of traction, those types of scenarios significantly get easier for someone to jump on board with. And let me just say this one disclaimer. Just because I'm saying any of this doesn't mean that any of this is going to work for you. It's very possible that you can follow this entire rubric, this entire outline, and none of it work and you still don't raise money. I am not the person writing the check, and even though you kind of follow this as a guideline, that does not guarantee that it's going to work. There are just certain situations that you have to go through, and this does not always happen just because you follow a list. When someone is raising money or investing in money or investing in a company, they have to love the company or feel a reason to get involved with it. And oftentimes, those type of things aren't met, and that's why capital is not raised. So how many of you guys here, or those watching at home or their office, have ever thought about raising money? Show of hands. Or have raised money. A couple of things that people don't talk about a lot. Do you really need or want an investor? Do you really need one? When you raise money, understand that this is now a marriage. How often did you have to date, for those of you that are married, how often did you have to date before you found that one that worked? Typically, it's many times. Do you really want or need an investor? And do you understand that this is a marriage? If your marriage is going to last forever, think of the business lasting 10 to 30 years. Are you really going to be able to work with someone else for years and years and years? It's your baby, right? Well, not if there's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other people associated with it. It's all of yours babies now. So I believe sometimes if you just work a little bit harder, you can save that kind of equity and not have to raise capital. But obviously there are a ton of reasons why capital can help you, and we'll go over those as well. You will lose all of their money and you will lose all of yours too. Are you okay with getting an investor and losing all of their money? Because it will happen if you don't have that mindset. Are you okay with losing that relationship with someone because you lost their money? And I have a strategy to how that can be a little bit better, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Can that investor actually help you? When raising money from someone, it should never just be about the money. Why? Because cash is easy to get. You can almost always find money somewhere. But there are so many other pieces associated with that cash or that investment that are far more important. The contacts that someone might have, the Rolodex that someone might have, the relationships, so many different things. Do they even have a track record in your space? What I mean by that is, have they done anything? If you're creating a tech company, you don't have to have someone that has a technology business today, but have they been in that space ever? You likely would not hire someone in tech for a restaurant if there's no tech associated with it. Why? They're going to give no value add. They might just write you a check and that's it. With that being said, could they be a better fit as an advisor than an investor? I define advisor as someone who may own a very small percentage of a company, less than 0.5%, but is typically not an actual investor, but they're able to really help guide you throughout the way. Think of it as a mentor, but with a stake in the company. Typically an advisor, they have what I will call, they'll get the equity over time. So they don't get the 0.5% that day, they get it kind of on a rolling basis of a little bit more accruing every year. And one other thing to be thinking about before you raise money, or if you're thinking about raising money or looking for an investor, is will you need follow-on funding? Many companies need to raise a small amount now, and if things go well, a bigger round later. That is really important when you're trying to figure out what the actual deal looks like. Depending on the town that you live in, some people are looking for deals that look really similar to a real estate deal. If you're in kind of a high-growth startup, typically they're not taking 50% of the company because they realize that so much follow-on funding will happen. But again, we're not going to go over the legalities of this as well. Is your business in the correct standard position to actually raise money? Or should you actually just go to work? Because work works, right? Let me say that again. Is your business in the correct standard position to be typically in the place where money is invested? Or should you pick up the phone to get more customers? Have you proven anything yet? Are you trying to hand someone a piece of paper and say, invest in this idea? Or can you show them exactly what the product is and kind of what it will look like as a runway? Doesn't mean all of it has to be developed. It just means, is there more? Is there something tangible? Or is it a piece of paper? And all too often people think, I have an idea, I have a business plan, I have something, now give me money. They haven't done anything yet. It's all about figuring out those steps along the way. And if you're not in that kind of traditional or standard place, you're probably not in the right position to raise capital. And when we're talking about capital, I'm directly talking about money in return for a stake in a specific company. Does that all make sense? So someone gives you $10,000 for 10% of your company is valued at $100,000. There are some more specifics into that, pre and post money, but those are very difficult to understand at times for some people, so we're not going to go into those things. Also, one of the most important things that we get...
I was just... you just brought up an interesting point with accepting money.
Yeah.
Because you do want to take the most amount of money that you can get for the smallest amount of your company, right? That's always good, but it's good because you get the money.
Right.
It could be bad in some cases because you have created a value of your company that may, in some instances, be negative, have negative impacts on your financial situation as an individual when it comes to taxes or bringing on other people. So say you take that $10,000 for 10% of your company. You've created a $100,000 company. Now you want to have a software developer that you want to incent with 5% of that company. Well, you've given him $5,000 that he has maybe some tax implications.
And has to see that.
It's very tricky.
So when doing this, and we go over this, it's very expensive. There's a lot of instances that you don't know, and just understanding.
It just can get complicated very quickly. So
obviously talk to a lawyer, talk to an accountant beforehand, and just make sure that you understand what you're really getting into. Because even though a company is valued at something, doesn't mean that any of that is actually liquid.
Right.
So you can get taxed on that, and that can be an absolute nightmare when having to deal with that. And if your company is valued at something, the IRS is expecting you to pay taxes on that thing, even if you're not making money on it.
Well, not to get off on a tangent, but consider this scenario. You're married. Mm-hmm. You take $10,000 for 10% of your company. You now have a $100,000 company. Then something happens and you get divorced. You're in that divorce, you have to split up your assets.
So you're just giving up some of your company.
So now you may owe $50,000 to your partner. I mean, there's all sorts of things.
Again,
so taking money is...
Talk to those service providers that understand, because you don't know what you're getting into and not. One of the most important, or one of the biggest challenges that I see is people thinking that they should be raising money when they really don't have an investable type of business. A mom and pop shop probably is not an investable business from an equity standpoint. A growth business, a high-tech technology startup, probably has some sort of investment associated with it. An agency, so a business that builds products or services for other people that is looking to raise money, doesn't make sense. Get customers, they pay you, they fund the services. A product and service, depending on what they are, may need to raise money. But also, do you want to give up equity when you could just go to a bank and get them to give you the money for 3%, 4%, 5% if you have good terms or can create good terms. Treat raising capital like selling your product to a customer. If you treat it like a customer, you will have more success. Investors are customers. This is a long process, so don't expect to have it happen overnight. Just because you meet with someone today does not mean that you're going to get a check today. And even if you do it correctly, there is a series of legalities that are important before you take that, not just take that check, but signing documents, putting it in the bank, making sure that when it goes into the bank, it did all the right things. So what are some things, so I look at raising capital a multitude of different ways. One, as I've invested in companies, and two, as I've raised money. So I kind of can see it from both sides and what's important. The most important thing, I think, when raising money was that we were solving a problem, that we had a solution for it, and that we had some traction on it. Maybe not a lot of traction, but we were able to sell the traction that we had to raise a significant amount of money. Again, don't just give a piece of paper. Prove that you have traction. And so that traction can look a lot of different ways. I think that your business actually has to have some sort of visibility and owning that traction, not just doing a Google search and saying, look, people are talking about this. I don't think that's enough. So problem, solution, traction. One of my favorite lines to tell an investor or trying to prove to them is that you're going to get there anyway, but if with their help, with their infusion of capital, you're going to get there quicker. So they can get their money back quicker. You're going to solve that world hunger, but with a $100,000 check, you're going to get there a heck of a lot quicker. Also, one of my favorite things in raising money was telling all my investors that they were going to lose their money. So then when we did, it didn't hurt as bad. Not all of them lost all their money. So depending on the type of company that you have, you want to make sure that that product solves a specific problem for a very specific target. And that you have distribution models set up in place so that you can plug and play and get ready to go when they're there. So how many of you guys know where to find an investor? No one, huh? So some places that I would do, angel.co, it's angellist.com, I believe it is. It's a high net worth of individuals that people go through and can find deal flow and also investors to find. Simply go onto Google and type Angel Group in your city. Don't type in your city, type in the city that you're in. So here you would write Norfolk Angel Group. What will come up? 757 Angels. If you're in Richmond, Richmond Angel Group. Richmond Investments, stuff like that. Words associated with raising capital plus the name of the city that you're in. If you're traveling, put the city in that you're going there. You're going to New York this weekend. Angel Network, New York City. You will find it. One of the best places I found them was asking other people. So I went to our service providers, our lawyers, our accountants, other entrepreneurs, our bankers, and business consultants. Their whole job is finding high net worth people to get them to use their services. So why not ask them who are the high net worth individuals? Make friends with them, ask for an introduction to some of these people, and leverage that out. I would say that 50 to 75% of the deals that we did were that. Leveraging other relationships. And then ask everyone that you know. So this is a little tricky, and I cannot remember what the actual FCC guidelines are now, but so the last time I raised money was in 2013, and I believe they were just passing a law then that allowed you to actually broadcast that you're raising money. Before that, you could not. So you couldn't buy a radio ad and say, buy 10 shares of the Norfolk Tides for $10. You couldn't do that. But I think now there are some changes where you are able to broadcast a little bit. But again, I don't have experience in that, so I don't like to speak about things that I haven't done. Ask everyone that you know for referrals. So right now, everyone here uses Gmail, I think, right? So go into Gmail, look at your contacts, sift through every single one of those, and say, email all of them and say, I'm raising money. Do you know who could be a good fit? Are you or someone else a good fit? How many contacts do you have on there right now? 1,500? You have a list of people that you can reach out to. Ask for referrals. In this case, I like to meet with everyone because you don't know who they know. And while I talk a lot now about not meeting with everyone, I think when you're in investment mode, you should meet with everyone. A little bit of qualifying with people, but you don't know who they don't know. And just because they're in a weird career doesn't mean that they're not sitting on a ton of money. And some of the wealthiest people have a ton of money associated with a ton of different things. And if you're not ready, or if you're not looking for a super big check, $10, $20, $50,000, some people might be able to write that wouldn't be able to write $1 million check. And so we've had several lawyers that we didn't think would be investors and very easily wrote us checks because $10, $15, $20,000 is a drop in the dime, drop in the bucket. But before you meet with anyone, obviously qualify them, do your diligence, do your due diligence before and after. Dinners, meetings, networking, there's a ton of money associated with this. Get your receipt books ready. Make sure to know what you're doing for that. This is not blog posts or posts to Facebook. It's typically phone calls, face-to-face meeting. I think Jeremy Alessi had asked how many meetings, what was my percentage of win to loss. We have 21 investors. Honestly, probably met with 25. We had a very good batting average once we actually asked for the money. Now, we didn't always ask everyone because not everyone was going to be the right fit because we could feel that it wasn't there. But when we actually asked, almost always it worked. And what's funny is sometimes people were like, well, I want to ask, I want to give more money, but we said no because we simplified it and we were trying to raise really small checks so that when we lost money, we didn't piss everyone off. If you lose $10,000 from someone who's wealthy, they don't care as much as if you lose $500,000 of their money. It's a nice steak dinner, I guess. Raising money isn't the end goal. It's just a step in the path. Money is important. Don't let anyone tell you money isn't important. But if you're raising money, it doesn't mean that the business is over. All the hard work is still in front of you. What kind of paperwork will you need? So this can get really expensive, or you got to get really creative with this. Do you need a business plan? We never had a business plan. We had some traction. We had an executive summary that if you go onto 1004.com and look for the downloadables, we have an executive summary on there that all you have to do is fill out the blanks and it'll make it for you. So there's a thing called a private placement memorandum, a PPM. Maybe you guys have heard of it. It's, as my lawyer will tell you, it's basically a document that says how you're going to lose all of these people's money. It's crossing the T's, dotting the I's to make sure that you don't get screwed. And as crazy as it seems, it's something that you put in place so that you don't get screwed. It's a very extensive business plan. Usually they're created by a lawyer, and they cost $10,000 to $110,000 is what I've seen. If you're doing a really big deal, it could cost even more money than that. When you have these documents, who is going to pay for the legal? That's a really good question to ask yourself, right? You can almost always bet that 20% of the deal is going towards legal. And is that coming out of the money that's directly being infused into the business? Did you communicate that or not? There's so many unknowns if you don't communicate. And very quickly you raise $100,000, you think everything's going great, and you do decide that the money's going out from that capital infusion. But if you're losing 20%, now you only have $80,000 to play with. And paperwork is never overnight either. So just because you get a check because someone's excited, paperwork goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I want a the instead of an a. I want this date instead of that date. I want this word to be, I want a to be an. I want an to be a many. Like, it is a pain in the butt. And so that's why I was saying I want to talk about legal, because let those lawyers take care of that, but just understand what is associated with raising money. Brendan has raised some money too, and he understands that, like, paperwork is a pain, and it gets expensive, and you have to pay for it, and there's no real.
Can still not.
And it could still not save you, and it could still not be right. Exactly. So, one of the most important things to ask a lawyer, there's a thing called preferred or common stock. So basically, A stocks or B stocks. Basically, I'll give you a real definition of both, but basically a preferred stock means that they get the money first. A common stock means usually they get it later. Typically, founders aren't preferred stocks. They're typically common stocks, and you leave preferred stocks for, I know it sounds crazy, you say preferred stocks for investors or people that are infusing capital. So defined, a preferred stock is a class of ownership in a business that has a higher claim on its assets and earnings than common stock. Preferred shares generally have a dividend that must be paid out before dividends to common shareholders, and the shares usually do not carry voting rights. What matters with this is if the company's going liquid, but there's a little bit of money left over, guess who's getting the money first? The preferred stock. So a lot of businesses or a lot of investors will ask for preferred stock and board seats. A common stock is a security that represents ownership in a business. Holders of common stock exercise control by electing a board of directors and voting on corporate policy. Common stockholders are on the bottom of the priority ladder, so we know what that means, the last to get paid, for an ownership structure. In the event of liquidation, common stockholders have rights to a company's assets only after bondholders, preferred stockholders, and other debt holders have been paid in full. So think about that. You start the business, you have common stock, you give money you have debts, you have preferred stock to other people, you have bonds out. Guess who's getting paid first? All those other people, you make no money. The reason you should be thinking about this is because likely all of this will happen in your business. And as much as it sucks, you just want to be prepared so that if you can give yourself preferred stock, you do. So a really quick way to understand kind of how, who to look for and what it could go into, and then I'm going to talk about some due diligence. Pick who you want to meet with, get a meeting with them, show them the product, gauge the fit, follow up with them, make the deal, rinse and repeat. It's not that simple, but that's a very easy way to look at it. Pick who you want. So who is your target customer? Who is your target investor? Get a meeting with them. Figure out however you can get a meeting with them. Show them the product, gauge the fit, gauge that they're a good customer. You might meet with them and realize they're a jackass. Now you don't want to marry them, right? You could fire them later. You know, we talk about the opportunity, raise your hand. Well, if you get that opportunity, raise your hand and realize I don't like this person, bail. Say, thank you, here's money for dinner, and be done. Gauge the fit, follow up, make the deal, rinse and repeat. This is so important. It's basically dating. So due diligence and potential investors. This is as the business who is looking for an investor, what they should be looking in those individuals. Do they have experience as being an investor? This does not mean buying stock on the stock market. Are they an expert in your field, or do they have capacity to be? Can they help more than cash? Do they have access to more experts and more cash? Are they going to be a silent investor? What does their track record look like? I recommend asking them all of these questions, just as they are to you. Are they qualified or an accredited investor? It is not a necessity that they are an accredited investor, but typically that's what you're looking for. Why? Because if they lose $20,000 of your dollars and they only make $20,000 a year, they're going to go homeless and they're going to hate you, and it's not necessarily the best thing. You probably want to try and have a qualified or an accredited investor if you can. Again, that's $200,000 a year, $300,000 as a family, or have $1 million in net worth. How will they help you? Straight up ask them. How do you anticipate helping us? If they say, well, I don't know. Well, I don't know if I want you to work with me, is what my response would be. It's terrible. And what kind of checks can they write? Are you meeting with people that can write the check that you want? If you're meeting with someone you expect a $500,000 check and all they can write is a $5,000 check, people do it all the time. They think someone is one thing and they're another. Also, how liquid can they make their money immediately? Is all their money time? So one of my no's was I wouldn't put this in one of the 4 unknowns. This was me qualifying someone, basically saying, hey, we're doing this. Are you interested? The response was, all my money is tied up in X, Y, and Z right now. I can't get it out. I don't think that's a loss for us. I think that's qualifying in someone saying, I can't get access to this money even if it's a small amount, because all my money is tied up in real estate or other ventures. And that happens a lot. And I think people underestimate, while someone may have a net worth of 10, 15, 20 million dollars, ask them how much money is actually in their savings account. It's usually not a lot. They usually don't have a ton of money that they can go to the bank and just pull out of their checking or savings account, because they've invested it into a multitude of different things. Now, what type of questions will those investors be looking for from you, the business? These are some of the things that you can anticipate and expect an accredited or any investor looking at investing in your business. It's not limited to them. Your books. How good is your documentation? What does your process look like? Have you figured out any of that from a sales funnel standpoint? What is your special sauce, and do you even have anything investable? Patent, obviously, some people look at that. Do you have a team that is all the same person, or is it a group of different people? Is it just you and you've hired other people to help you? What does that look like? Do you have a track record of success? Now, first-time ventures, many of us have. They say, well, how do I do this? Here's kind of a hack. Here's this week's Zack hack. You ready? Get someone on your team or an advisor who does. In the venture world, in the investment world, they'll call those the gray hairs, right? So give Bill Shively 0.25% of your business over 5 years vested, and you can say, hey, I have Bill Shively who started a business 30 years ago and sold it, and even though I haven't, he's my gray hair, or he's my track record that shows that I can get there. I remember there was a company we were working with, I was an investor in, and had a decent stake in the company, and I thought the product was good for a long time, but we kept talking to the same company. We were trying to raise, I think, $100,000, and they kept saying, there's something missing. And then I joined the team, and they said, okay, well, now they have a track record. Now can you get a gray hair? Can you get someone on the team, an advisor, someone on the board that can help guide them through the way, who's been there before? And if you look at a lot of businesses that have investors, look at who are on some of those, either on their board or just in the business. It's usually someone that has ties to success. And so someone is giving up a very small percentage of their business to hope that that person can instill some wisdom or help them, open up the Rolodex, and provide them with more success. Typically, an advisor in this case isn't actually giving capital. They can, but usually it's strictly a just advising once or twice a year board meeting. How old are you? They're going to look at that. You know, if you're 55 and they don't think you're doing in good shape, they might not invest in your business. If you're young, it might be too young. There's no sweet spot there, but someone's going to actually address that and look at that. Most investors are looking for an ROI between 5 and 10. 5 and 10 times return. How quickly can they get that? They also are wondering, do you even have skin in the game? Did you hand this piece of paper to me and say, give me money? Or have you busted your tail? You got $10,000 in credit card debt. You've gone to bat. You've done X, Y, and Z over and over and over again. And you actually have real skin in the game. You canceled all your Netflix and Hulu accounts. These are the type of encounters that people will want to know. Are you a good founder of a business, or are you going to take my infusion of capital and blow it on catering? How often have you seen people blow through money? Look at all these Silicon Valley businesses. They just give them like whatever they want. And then they lose all the money and they wonder where it went. Well, if you're catering lunch every day to 100 people, think about how expensive that gets quickly. right? Should that money go to that, or should it go to somewhere else? I think an investor is looking, especially in a non-San Francisco area, is looking for, how are you going to spend my money? So do you have skin in the game, and what will you do with the money? Show proof of concept. They want to know that it works. Some investors want to know that they can actually be the customer. And so can they play with it? And then there's what's the market? Is it a market that they have ties to? Can they help expand that? And then also a little thing called product market fit, which basically says, is this a solution that people want in the market, and has it been proven, and will people actually use it in the market? And is the market big enough? Oftentimes people are looking for a very big market to get into. So how can you meet with these people? Ask for an introduction. Just email them, LinkedIn them, find them on Twitter, go up to them. A situation yesterday, I had met this individual once. This is not in raising money, but this is how I got this scenario. I see him walk by, I know what he looks like, I run out the door and I say, hey, I need to talk to you. Sometimes that's what you have to do, right? But if you're too afraid and you're behind a screen and you won't do it, work works. Right, Nate?
Work.
Have a script ready as to what you want to do. I believe that if you have an A player that you want to go after, maybe practice it on a B player first. Don't practice your first time on your most important person, because you don't know what you don't know yet. You don't know what's going to happen, and likely what someone in a B squad can help you understand what the A squad is looking for. Know what your ask is. Don't ask for a range. Oh, we're looking for $25,000 to $40,000. Well, which one is it? Which one is it? Right? How often do you hear people say, oh, we're at a range, but then they don't range the percentage. So we're looking for 25 to 40 for 8 to 10%. Or excuse me, 25 to 40 at 8%. Well, which value is your company at? You look like an idiot if you give it a range. Know what your ask is. So if you need 10,000 for 10%, you know what that is. All right, so we talked a little bit earlier about, should you raise from one person or a lot of wealthy people? I'm of the opinion that if you raise from multiple people and ask for a smaller amount of money, while you could please or dissatisfy more people, when the bad things go, if someone's losing a lot less money, it's not as big of a deal. Remember, these people understand the risk they're going into, and if you lose 10,000 of their dollars instead of $100,000, it's a big difference. I often feel like what we talked about in my failures a few weeks ago, that deal where we lost about $46,000 hurt me more than anyone else, because these individuals didn't lose as much money as they could have in something else. What are the terms of the deal? Are you going to do a milestone-based approach? Meaning, we'll give you $10,000 when you do these milestones, another $10,000 when you hit this milestones. They call them tranches, basically. They say we'll give you, $5, but we're going to distribute it in $1 increments. It's very common. This is a good one too. Look for a lead investor that you can leverage to get other people to jump on board with. So I'll tell you, our example here is I went to Dubby Wynn, who was one of the founders in the Weather Channel. And I said, hey Dubby, I want you to invest. I did this because I knew that if I got him, I could ask others that wanted to be in the room with him and leverage his brand recognition to get a check. And it worked. So find your lead investor and then find other leeches to who want to leech onto that investor. So if Steve Jobs was still around, he made a deal, and other people would say, well, Steve Jobs invested, people would probably jump on because Steve Jobs invested. Steve Jobs invested. Does that make sense? So find your lead investor. Even if you have a check in hand, yes is only yes when the paperwork is signed and then the money is in the bank. Just because you have a check does not mean your deal is complete. A yes is only a yes when you have the paperwork signed and then you put the money in the bank. All too often, the check is the easy part. Getting the lawyers on two sides to agree to a contract is the difficult part. I can tell you with deals 2-3 years ago to deals today, there is just jargon back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And you're just like, can we just sign the damn documents? I mean, it literally gets that annoying where you're complaining about one word, but it's what happens. And then, your lawyer's making $300, $400, $500, $600 an hour just to change a letter. And these things happen. Once the deal is done, set expectations when and how you will communicate with these folks. What metrics will you be sharing? What metrics do they want to see? In the deal, obviously, you'll know about who has board seats. Are there any openings for people? What are you looking for? And don't spend all your money once you get it. I think communication is so important in this case. I think I've done a so-so job at it, sometimes better than others. But the key is really understanding or explaining to people, setting the expectations of what they're going to get. If they will get, if they'll get communicated with once a month from you, once a quarter, once a year, all of these things can be set up front. If a business doesn't hear from you for a quarter and shit hit the fan beforehand, but you didn't communicate that with them, and they could have fixed it, there's so much that could have been fixed earlier on. And the worst is when investors going, well, where's my deal? What's going on? Because you don't communicate with them. And so I think setting those expectations up front is so important. So those are a lot of pieces to how to raise money, what to be looking for, things to anticipate. But ultimately, I think it really is just about treating an investor like you would a customer. Not everyone's going to be the right fit, but when you find the right fit, they're going to jump on board. And so be looking for that. Questions? Bill?
Yeah, as an investor, I will say one of the things that I'm always being pitched for people wanting me to invest in their company, and I think one of the things that I look at more than anything else are what are the terms of the deal.
Sure.
Is the percentage enough to make it worth my time? Your buddy Damon John always says that when somebody comes to Shark Tank and says, I'll give you 7%, he usually blows that off because it's not worth his time to invest in 7%. Something that you did not mention, but I will mention it to you, is the deals that I've done background checks on the people that I'm investing in. Because if they ever gone bankrupt, do they have any felony convictions? Have they not told me something that's in their background that would lead me to believe that they're not going to treat my money with the same respect that I do?
Yeah.
But I think that the terms of the deal, and you're right, when somebody ballparks.
So I would put that in team, right? Who is the team? Like going deeper into the team, who are they? Do they have it? Yep. Yeah. But you're totally right. And spending, what's a background check cost? $50?
$50.
Yeah. So $50 to find out that someone. Yeah.
Well worth it. Oh, you can find out all kinds of stuff. You'd be amazed what you can find out.
Sure. Did you also run credit scores?
I did not do that because I was pretty confident with their credit score, but I have no problems in spending an extra $50 and running that too.
Sure.
So, yep.
Melody, did you have a question? Sorry. Say it.
No.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about getting the deal done and getting the arguing over a single word in a contract or an operating agreement.
Right.
what is your advice for us, that might not be legally savvy, and how to find lawyers that we can trust, and when to maybe stop that process, because that process, you're right, can go on forever, can cost a lot of money.
So I believe it's kind of like just hiring an expert. Everyone is going to have their particular way. So you might not ever get that true answer. And I know that's not what you want to hear, right? But every lawyer that I've ever showed a different document to, they're all like, well, I would have done it this way. I would have done it this way, right? An SEO expert is going to say, well, I would have done it this way. I'm a designer. I would have done it this way. If I could, you're a developer. How often do you like someone else's code, right? Not very often. So I think it's just their craft and the way that they create that. And so it's a real pain in the butt to hear that. But hoping that it's just good enough and that you won't get screwed in court is kind of where you want to be. But no one is ever going to say, I remember giving this document, and so it was lawyers to lawyers. So it was internal company to my lawyer on this one deal. And these folks literally, they're literally complaining about like a line. And then I get a different lawyer associated, and they're like, well, I want to change this. And so I think you see that because you're never going to please anyone, is ultimately where you're going to get out of that. And so maybe beforehand you say, I'm willing to spend 4% on this, and let's get it pretty good. Maybe go to them with a template beforehand. So we talked about briefcase. Maybe having something like that where you're not actually crafting that. So if it costs them, or if it costs them 10 hours to make that document, and then you can take that document or any document online and say, here, fix this. Hoping, it's a risk, right? But you're trying to not get screwed. But creating all that documentation is the hard part, right? Then filling in the blanks of where that back and forth are.
Personally, do you think it should be that hard?
No, I don't.
Or do you think it should be a commodity?
I think it should be simple. I don't understand why.
I don't understand either. Why can't we not have an a la carte?
I don't understand why it costs so much money for legal. I don't. But I think people are terrified of it, so then you go do it, right? Now, my thought on legal, completely different to this, is how legal should you be is depending on if someone's going to die or not, right? If someone isn't going to die, so I'm writing an ebook on how to write an ebook, do I need to make sure that I'm super legal to do that? Or if I'm writing how to sharpen a knife and someone could cut their hand off and die, I might want to make sure I'm a little bit more legal, right? And so I think that it's crazy to be thinking like that, but it shouldn't be that hard to figure out, hey, do 99% of lawyers think that this is a document that's going to be good in court or whatever? But it's the same thing with getting a patent, right? So if you patent something and then a big boy wants to build something, you can never defeat them. So why then get a patent anyway? Bill?
One of the things, Zach, sometimes you can approach an investor, if you don't want to give up equity in your business, is you can approach an investor with attractive terms for a loan. Mm-hmm. People will loan money to businesses given the proper terms, 8-10% or something like that for a short-term loan.
Especially if it can be a bank.
Well, that's it. And then you don't have to give up equity.
Yeah.
So what do you think what makes the decision, what are the factors that weigh into the decision to take money versus bootstrapping? So is it, what's the tipping point where you say, okay, I'm going to be here in a year. If I take this much money, I'm going to be here in 6 months. Yeah. If you're able to bootstrap, should you? How should you protect every bit of equity with everything that you have, or what's your? How do you make that decision?
Well, again, it's all going to be personal opinions or what the thoughts are on someone. I want to do things my way, and I'd rather be in the weeds longer, personally, than to have a little bit of money from someone, but have them over my shoulder saying, do this, be my mom, be my dad. That's me personally.
What if you miss a time, what if you miss a timing opportunity that was,
I've many opportunities to raise significant amount of money again. And I've always said no, because I feel like I can get there on my own. But then I look back and say, well, how many of these things do I have to make sure that I've actually done? You know, can I actually get some of these people, some of these actual things that we say? Or did I build the equivalent of a mom and pop business? I don't think that to be the case, but when you go through and go, okay, this is lucrative, what are you willing to do? Okay, well, you think the company's then worth this. What I think the company is worth and what someone else might be willing to give it are completely two totally different things. So if I think this business is worth $1, but it's only made 50 cents, someone wants the deal at 50 cents, so it's like oil car salesman going back and forth. So I think it's a fine line. I think it's easier when you have multiple partners to raise money. I think when you're a solo founder, it's not as easy a decision. Because you already have 3 partners, who cares? What's a fourth? You're losing 8%, right?
And how much time should you devote? Because if, say, you are bootstrapping something,
Yeah.
and you now have people that are saying, we want to invest in you. You're looking at that and you're saying, well, I know that's going to take.
So I think you got to look at who is looking to invest and look at some of your customers and see if your customers will fund it forever. Right? So let's say you have a decent B2B product, right? And it costs you $25,000, or that person's going to pay $25,000 a month to pay for it, right? We'll see if they'll give you the equivalent of $20,000 a month up front for a year or two, and see if they'll fund it, but you gave them a discount on the rate. I think that's being creative. You're basically, instead of getting an investor, you're getting an affiliate or a partner, but not giving up any money on that. So I think sometimes by bootstrapping, but being creative with who could be your potential investor will help you more. So if you could get a port who wants something and basically say, I'll give you a 25% discount if you pay for it up front, that might be more lucrative. It's all about just trying to keep as much in hand as possible, both cash and equity. But if you have partners, I think it's a lot easier to give up a little bit of money or a little bit of space because you've already given it up. I own 100% of Hatch. I look at that and I go, well, I'm going to give some of this up. What does that even mean? Even if I'm still super majority, even if I give up 10%, I still have to look at someone else and say, am I okay with this? But if you own 40%, 40%, 20%, and then someone else wants to come in and everyone loses 10 to 5%, it might not be as bad. Bill?
There should be some, well, I agree. Anytime you sell up any equity or sell any equity in your business, it's a trade-off.
Sure.
And so, if
What's the
somebody's going to
trade-off
give you a check for $50,000, they expect certain things back in return. But it should not be, one of the things you said early on, Zach, which is exactly correct, it's not just the money. The money's part of it, but you should be bringing in somebody as a partner that you can actually work with that brings some expertise to your business. Either management or marketing or some kind of skills that will help enhance the business. Otherwise, it's just a check.
That's what they talk about on Shark Tank, right? It's not the cash. It's, I'm going to give you all this other stuff that you don't even know or understand, and that's what's valuable. I remember talking to Damon. He was like, I've invested $4 million in companies. I've spent $6 million on doing the deals. So there's a heck of a lot more due diligence in there, but he has this, you're trying to find more platforms to jump on and have them grow you. And if that check can be associated with someone that has a platform to make something better, then you want to jump on that, right? So if you're developing an app and you can get, new and trendy on the App Store, and that, then maybe that's worth an extra 5 or 10 points because that's going to turn into an extra $5 or $10 million. But if you don't know that you can get there and someone has no experience in there, and most people don't have experience, by the way, right? Most people are going to tell you one thing and they're nothing. They're not going to really be able to help you, right? So maybe try a little test and figure out how that will work. But just, I've been this for 15 years. Okay, well, what does that mean? You've been your own business owner for 15 years. That's lovely. Have you ever done what I've been trying to do? And I think more of this is about really figuring out what your buyer personas look like, what your market looks like, and once you find the right one, to then start dating all those people over and over again. So if you like tall blondes, date every tall blonde until you find the one that you like. Or brunettes, like mine is. I realize they don't like blondes. She'll never watch this.
And ask your potential investors if they've ever lost $10,000 in an investment. If they say yes, and I felt like crap about it, then you probably need to run the other
Very
direction.
true.
Because that's not a good
your
match.
reputation is on the line.
Yeah.
You lose their money, you're the guy in town that lost that money. Is that what you want?
Yep.
Any other questions? All right, investing is a game. Treat it like that.
I don't have a question. I just have a little bit of an anecdotal story about a quick 180, and I won't go into the details of it, but I will say that we did take money, we got investment, and the investment we didn't get fully through the investment round, and I think at the end of the day we would have been a lot better off if we had not taken the investment and we had continued to bootstrap, because there was a sort of a gut punch that comes if something happens and you are used to a certain level of funding. Changes have to be made in your organization, so it can be, a lot of people will say, well, how could taking money be bad? Well, you can take money, you can get set up, you can set your business up a certain way, and if that level of funding doesn't continue, then you have to make hard changes to your company that can really have a negative impact. So, it's not always good,
Another thing to also think about, so when we did Start Norfolk, we used to give away money. None of that money was ever worth it. I once wrote a $25,000 check to someone. They never launched their business. So was that worth it? You know what I mean? It's just, you look at that and you say, I thought you wanted to start a business. I thought you wanted to do this. And so when someone says that, I got an email from someone the other day, they're raising $3.5 million. I said, are you, no product out, no nothing. I'm like, who do you think you are? What makes you think that you can do that? You have no track record. You have nothing that shows me anything. But these people in their mind think that that's the win. Once you realize that that's not the win, that working is what's important, and getting customers and keeping happy customers, that's what's important, I think you'll get a lot further. And I'm sorry to hear that you've had some bad instances, but you'll know not to do it in the future, hopefully.
I tell you what, it's difficult. It's difficult. If somebody comes to you and says, we want to give you money, it's really hard to think about all the negative possibilities of that. It sounds great. It sounds great. And so that is, I like what you're saying about focusing on work, focusing on getting profits.
Focus on why you need the money.
Focus on why you need the money, where you're going to spend it.
So if you have an inventory, you have a PO, I can't think of the word, a product order of 10,000 units and you need $100,000. Go to the bank and they'll give you the money. They will in many cases.
Not 100. Well, I don't know, maybe.
If you have a product order that's been, there are more instances than not that I've seen when you have or call that person and say, can I get 25 now? Can you pay for 50% up front? Get more creative. It's not you don't need to raise money for that case, do you? You need to figure out ways to get that money established. So.
Well, like Damon John says, the more money you raise, the more money you blow.
Yeah.
And how do you pay yourself in a situation where you're accepting someone else's capital?
They're going to ask you that. I remember there was a deal once where someone wanted to pay themselves not a significant amount, 65 a year, but it was from 0 to 65, and the raise was 100. So 65% of the money was going to go to their salary. And I said, oh, then if you take legal into consideration, there's $20,000 to play with. I said, do you really think someone's going to pay your salary to do this? And they said yes. And I said, well, I don't think anyone's ever going to raise that money. Or you're never going to raise that money. They didn't. So I think it's understanding and telling people what you're going to do. If you're going to pay yourself, you got to tell them, and then don't lie about it.
Do you think there's a point where where people will tolerate some salaries for the founders, or
I don't think there's anything the matter with telling someone, hey, you gotta live. Mm-hmm. But don't be outrageous. That's where I think it becomes the problem. Don't raise $1 million and give yourself $500,000 of it. Make a fair salary, and I think, and as long as you're upfront with that, I think people will respect that. They might say no, and they might say, we don't want to give you 100, we want to give you 80. And that's kind of what you're going to have to look at.
I think it's a hard sell. Nowadays, I think 10 years ago, you could go out and get, you have an idea, you say, I need to make money to leave my other job. I think it's harder now. I don't know, that's my opinion.
I think if you have that track record, mm-hmm. and say, here's what we've done, here's our traction, and say, of course I need to stay afloat too, so some of this money is going to go towards that, not an unreasonable amount of money. So if you're asking for 120 a year, 10 grand a month, but you can live off of 50 grand a month, you should probably ask for 50, maybe ask for somewhere in the middle. I think that's where you're going to see it to be more fair and respected and accepted. But I think if you ask for, like this one person I was telling you about, ask for 65 out of $100,000, they're going to look at you and say, that isn't right. I haven't seen that to be an issue where founders getting paid is a concern. Because people know that if the founder is worrying about their life instead of building the product, that they are not going to be able to get that product to market the way that you want them to, or grow it the way that you want. They're stressing about life instead of the product. Thank you.